You want to know why I never killed myself? After what I saw, lived through, losing my leg, losing my wife. Because it comes for all of us, man. You and I know it more than most. We see it every shift, but we can't let ourselves succumb to it.
Last season, season one, we had the rooftop scene between Robbie and Abbott. This season, it takes place in the trauma room. And to me, it kind of feels like that's the perfect place for it because Robbie seems to be the mass casualty of season two, in my
It is.
mind.
He
Um,
is.
so talk about what Abbott's seeing in Robbie in that scene, leading up to that hug that like Robbie has needed all shift.
Yeah, well, where John put it, like you said, in Trauma One was such a key idea because they performed the resuscitative hysterotomy there, and um, just like the concept of that procedure in my mind, at least, because it's so rare, it really doesn't happen very often. Um, uh, I just had this idea that Abbott had never done it before, and which I love because they have this. It's much like the mass casualty. They prepare for everything, and then they don't know what's coming through the door. And so here's a moment where this comes through the door, and um, there's just joy in the idea that my training is there, and I know exactly, even though I've never actually done this exact procedure. Um, we need all hands on deck, and I'm ready. And I don't necessarily think that he couldn't have done it without Robbie. I think he could have, but I I believe he recognized that it was important for Robbie to experience it, and they got to do it together. So that's one thing. So that helped make this scene as we looped around and then back into Trauma One, at the scene of this beautiful moment, land, for Abbott and his understanding of how to try to get through to Robbie and to also bring in a little bit of his history to make it make sense. Yeah, it's beautiful, the whole arc of the season, and these doctors, everyone in EDs has experienced a lot of stress. They're understaffed, they're underfunded, they have so much coming through, and it just becomes really difficult to manage it. And Abbott understands that just as much as Robbie. And when you don't do the work, which Abbott believes he's doing, it can have a very, very bad consequence. And we've seen it before. So it's one of the things that helps Robbie decide to stay.
Yeah, and also like you can tell like how worried like Abbott is for Robbie because we watch Abbott watching Robbie the entire time and keeping track of him everywhere he is in the ED.
Yeah, it's totally true. And then I again, I don't think he needed him in there, but like he's watching him, but he's like, hey, get your mind off of that and come. I know you want to get on that motorcycle, but like, look at this, look at this, look at what we get to do.
And then in that conversation that they have after, like that also you brought up like that we hear some of Abbott stuff, and it's like the most that we've heard Abbott talk about himself, really, I feel like all series so far, because he talks about what he saw and lived through, losing his leg, losing his wife, but feels like he only does so and bring that up to get through to Robbie, right?
Totally. And I think we spent a lot of time just because it is a longer scene, and John was directing, so we talked, we rehearsed it and talked a lot about it before we even got on set. And one of the things that I thought was important is was that Abbott has, coming off of season one, we see him, say, I know what my purpose is, and I'm doing the work, and my therapist says I find comfort in the darkness. All that you should talk to my therapist. And so then 10 months later, we find both of these guys who are in very similar places, although Abbott has, you know, finding comfort in his purpose. He believes he's in process and doing this work. But the truth of the matter is, he's working his on during the day as a SWAT medic. So it's not too different than riding your motorcycle without a helmet, and I like that we built that in, and I felt strongly about that because it gave, it sort of presents this question for Abbott, which I hope we go more into and explore, just like how is he doing and where is he in this process of mental health. And there's so much shame behind admitting that you need help, and I think that that is part of what Robbie is experiencing. There's the stigma to it.
Yeah, because like there is still so much backstory that we don't know about Abbott. We don't know how he lost his leg. We don't know how he lost his wife,
We don't.
which I hope we get into. But I'm curious, who do you think Abbott would be today without therapy? Because something I like is that we do hear about him being in therapy, like you brought up. But who would he be without it?
I don't know. I'm not sure he would have made it. I think he's just from my own personal prep, like the kind of tragedy he's experienced, his grief is so challenging. It just never leaves. And um, for him, the hospital's home, and he doesn't, it's like that Frank Sinatra thing where he never wants the party to end. Like his party is in the hospital. And so when it does end, he doesn't really sleep. He's at home, figuring out another party to go to. And
And listening to the police scanner.
exactly. So I'm not sure. But I'm glad he's working on it.
Abbott tells Dana that Robbie doesn't like to listen, but as we've seen these two shifts, Robbie does listen to Abbott. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's not easy to get him to listen. Kind of what I was saying, just that they're both people that have had to run this very challenging, stressful environment. And so Abbott understands it on a level that most others don't. And they're best friends. I think he says, I'm your emergency contact, which that provides another layer of how how deep their friendship is. So you know, it, it's an interesting place because there aren't a lot of people who can kind of check Robbie, and Abbott is one of them.
I want to get that backstory and like how far back it goes.
That was actually another one of my ideas. It's funny because sometimes I'll be filling out the forms myself, and I have the only reason I thought of it is because I have a very close friend in LA when I have to put the emergency contact for the kids, and I can't put my wife, and so I have a guy that's like that I would trust, who knows everything, who can handle it, and I just thought that maybe if Robbie had somebody like that, it would be Abbott, because Abbott just knows how to get things done, especially when things are going wrong.
That is very true. Does Abbott think he's gotten through to Robbie by the end of that scene?
You always bring the best questions, Meredith.
You?
I think he thinks he did the best he could, you know? Um, but I don't, and that's just what Abbott thinks. But what I think is what Shawn thinks is, uh, I, I think it's a series of things. I think it starts with Dr. Mohan when they're out there talking about, her future, and he says what he thought his life was going to be. And then it's a question of whether or not he's telling the truth. But I think that kind of begins his journey through the last third of this with and then coming to Abbott, that conversation. And then Dana sort of kind of gives him a couple jabs, and then he meets up with Langdon, who is basically says, "You are exactly what I've seen in every rehab." And then I think that is a realization for Robbie that he might not have been the best mentor that he could have been to this guy who's definitely, you know, needing a good mentorship. And there's nothing wrong with having an addiction problem. It maybe the way he dealt with it, not the greatest, but he's a good guy and you can see that. And he's a damn good doctor. And then when he gets in there with the baby, I think it sort of shapes the beginning of what started with Mohan and that idea of, yes, of course, he has this traumatic past where he was left, but it's also a little bit like, I don't know, for me, that's the way I read into it. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, I agree. Talk about filming that scene with Noah.
Yeah, the whole day, the whole episode was like, um, there was so much in the trauma. It was one of our biggest ever, uh, with the resuscitative hysterotomy, and a lot of medical that that I was challenged by. But of course, the being able to work with the practical stuff, being in a scene with Noah, who just is so good at this stuff, and then John, creating this environment that just felt very natural and real, um, and working with both of them. Noah and I have a history and a friendship that goes back a long time. I have a collaboration and a friendship with John, so there's something about that shared experience of knowing each other that you can just feel without having to, um, you know, fake it, if that makes sense. So, and the trust I have in both of them in these scenes, it is so special. There's no way to kind of articulate it, how that feels. I don't have that on any other kind of creative collaboration. So being in there with those two guys I admire and respect so much, it's it's it really is a great time in my career.
Duke tries to secure a promise out of Robbie that he'll be coming back before he leaves. All Robbie will say is he'll think about it. How does Duke feel about how they leave things?
I think he's disappointed, but he also uh, I asked I asked for a line that they let me put in there, which is just, well, whatever, man, just don't f- up that bike. We both put too much work into it, and I think he would love to just slap him, um, and at the same time, I think he understands. And I think it's heartbreaking for Duke, that because this is a guy who's, Duke's a couple decades older than Robbie, maybe, I don't know how many, but at least a couple, and the guy's got a lot of good years left in him and a lot that he still has to offer. And uh, it's heartbreaking when someone can't see the value in themselves that you see in them, or that you feel for them.
We now know what Al Hashimi has been hiding all shift, like about her seizure disorder, and telling Robbie about it doesn't go over that well. She tells him she's come to respect his opinion, but we've also seen all shift that he's really going through something, and like it feels like everyone around him can see it. And he's not acting the best way to things. Has she picked, how much of that has she picked up on?
I think that's why she goes to him. I think she's been trying to appeal to his intellect, appeal to his practice, appeal to him emotionally, and everything is falling flat. So I think in approaching him, she brings her wound and appeals to his wound. Um, Immediately when they meet each other, there is something, they sense each other, a similarity in each other. They're cut from a similar cloth, but have vastly different approaches to medicine. Um, and I think at this point, she's seen enough of his practice. She takes issue, and before she takes him into the room and shows him her chart, she tells him, I would have taken a different approach, but she's come to recognize and realize you don't want everyone to be the same. You don't want everyone to go about things in the same way because you don't grow. He challenges her and he forces growth upon her in the same way that whether he acknowledges it or not, she forces growth upon him. And so one example of that is after she speaks to him about the Samira situation, he brushes her off and basically says, you're incompetent, and I'm going to leave. I just want to, something that would make me feel better. I'm paraphrasing here is, if I knew this hospital was in good hands when I leave. But then the next time we see him, he apologizes to Samira in his own way. So whether he'll admit it or not, Dr. Al-Hashimi has had an effect on him. So when she goes to him and she reveals this part of herself in an attempt to get closer to him and, lessen or make shorter the distance between them, she is anticipating it will go much better than it does. And maybe one could be like, why would she do that when he's proven himself when he's shown only one side of himself to her throughout the day? I think there is a warm, deep feeling, generous, loving, committed doctor that she sees throughout the shift, despite the shield and the barriers that he puts up. So I think she's fixated on that. It might be her eternal optimism, but yeah, it's painful to see how he responds.
Talk about filming the scene starting in 214 and then carrying over into the finale, and then the other Al-Hashimi and Robbie scene in the finale with Noah, because like the first one starts off with probably the warmest moment we've gotten between them when it's like, oh, I respect your opinion. He's like, oh, likewise. That's the warmest we've seen between these two characters all season. And then we devolve into this like tense and angry like dynamic between them. So just talk about filming that with Noah.
I loved filming those scenes with Noah. It was nice. I was experimenting with something in my own work where I think historically, when I've had really intense scenes, I isolate. I don't talk to anybody. I try to stay in the pocket. But for this show and the way this show works, it's really hard. There's really not much space where you can carve out privacy. You're all on set together. There are a lot of people. It feels like it's a big community and a warm and supportive community, like the crew and everything. I love them. And I really leaned into that. I was having conversations with my crew colleagues, and Noah and I were talking a lot. We were kind of shooting the shit and we were laughing, but then as soon as cameras would go up, we would get back in that place. And it was nice to dip in and out with him, because I think there's a certain agility about the both of us as actors where we can really focus intensely and then be loose. And so it was nice and necessary because of the weight of the material to dip in and out in that way. But I really enjoyed it with Noah, and it was a little uncomfortable, that last fight scene. We actually shot the car scene before we did that last fight scene, so that our big confrontation was my last scene of season 2. And the first time we rehearsed it, we went all the way there. We went all in, and the crew started clapping, and like it was a pretty big scene. And immediately we hugged each other and just made sure that we were good and warm towards each other, because you have to feel safe with your scene partner in order to go to these uncomfortable places with each other. And we didn't, I haven't seen the episode yet, but on the day, like when we were filming it, we certainly didn't hold back. So it was important to check in with each other frequently and make sure we were doing good. And we both were. This is what, I can't speak for Noah, although I've heard in interviews him say this too, that he enjoys the juicy parts, the drama. This is what we were trained to do, and this is what we love to do, as uncomfortable as it is.
Scott told me that Al Hashimi stops driving at the end because she knows she shouldn't even be driving and she's in a really bad place in her mind. Where is her head in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, Scott's right. She shouldn't be driving and she knows that. And she's never been in that situation before where if something happens once, she knows what she needs to do. And there are no strict guidelines when it comes to practicing medicine, but there are with driving. So if you've had a couple seizures in a day, you can't get behind the wheel and the clock starts. You have to wait 6 months, be totally seizure free, make sure that they're managed, and then you can get your driver's license back. But I think the way that Robbie treats her and belittles her and, just demeans her. And I'm speaking from the character, okay? This is not Noah Wiley, right? Just want to make sure. But the way it's cruel, it's cruel for somebody to reveal vulnerability and then for you to stomp on it. And that's what he seems to do because the other option for him is to say, look, this seems serious. What are your options? And she says, I just spoke to the neurologist and she says that I can work with double coverage. And he says, no, you are incompetent. And that is something that has haunted her entire life, that I can't do it. I'm incompetent, which is what drives her to be so terrifyingly high achieving. For that reason, she is so good at what she does. And so for him to just say, no, you cannot do it. You are not able to do it. I think that triggers this like 8-year-old girl who is full of rage and feels the injustice of her condition and her life. And she stomps her way to her car and says, yes, I can drive. Of course, this isn't how it's played, but in her mind, she's like, him, them all, I can do it. And then she imagines her son in the passenger seat of the car, and that makes her lose it. And there was a portion of that scene that was actually omitted, which was her calling her ex and saying, hey, I'm having some car trouble. Is it okay if you watch our son overnight? And he says to her, are you okay? Do you need me to come get you? And that's when she starts to crumble because more than anything else, she needs love and comfort and warmth and company, really. But she doesn't trust anyone in that moment, and so she needs to contain it and keep it for herself.
How is filming that scene? Because it's emotional for her, but it's also like just emotional in the fact that she's all alone. So how is filming that for you?
Just thinking about it makes me emotional. It was a hard scene to film, not because of the stuff in the car, but it started really technical. So there's like hours of technical work with the car. And then when we got to the inside of the car, it was 2 takes. John is a sniper as a director. He's so efficient and he's so good. He knows exactly what he wants. And so he told me what the scene was. We did it for the first take. And he said, do you want to just go again? And I felt like there was more. I did it, but I was tired and I was in this technical place. And then so we did it again and it was much fuller. And he wanted to wrap it. And I said, that's it. And he said, yeah, do you want to go again? We can, but you don't need to. So I said, I trust you. I don't want to. So that portion of the scene was actually probably a total of 5 minutes or something of filming, but everything else took so much longer. And that's the magic of movie making, right? Of TV making is we need all these technical details for the story and for the audience to understand and track where her mind is and what's happening. But it can be incredibly technical as the actor.
Something that I noticed about the shift is so much of the staff is going through something, but they're all going through it alone. And when I talked to Supriya, she said that people in high stress positions like this tend to isolate when things happen. So is that true of Al Hashimi in general, or is there someone else at PTMC that you think she would feel comfortable opening up to?
I don't think she's ever confided in colleagues about this. I think she's been very organized. known how to responsibly manage everything that's happening with her, and gotten professional help that she needs. Um, she definitely doesn't. You know what I was also playing with? Like her ex doesn't know because she hadn't had seizures she certainly didn't have seizures before she was seizure free for 11 years after the laser ablation. And you would have to be seizure free in order to be able to be qualified to work with an NGO like Doctors Without Borders. So she was seizure free. She had her kid. If she thought the seizures were coming back, I don't think she would have, in her high stress position and all, like, I think maybe she wouldn't have added that layer to or of complication to her life with already having a high stress job and also having a family, and knowing at the time that the relationship wasn't working, but she wanted to have kids. So she had her kid, and then they started up again a couple years into her child, who's now 5. But she'd been seizure free before her first day at PTMC. So I think she's learned how to manage her life. It's just on this one day, it's a really bad day, because she's never had 2 seizures in one day.
Mohan's career is very much up in the air at the end of the finale. Both Robbie and Al Hashimi have suggested geriatrics, and in the finale, she says maybe she will go that route. But like, what does she want to do, not think she should do when it comes to her career at this point?
I mean, I think it's strange because like we're talking about this in terms of finding a fellowship or an elective, but what I think she's really trying to do is stay in Pittsburgh. Like I think she's really trying to figure out a way to stay in the hospital because there's nothing left for her in Jersey. Her mom really was her only tether there, and it is her realizing she has like a few more tethers here than she does back home. And yeah, I think she's like doing everything she possibly can. So when it's like, yes, this idea of like what I should do to stay, but she's like really scrambling to feel like she has community is I think really what she's doing, and feel like her life isn't as unmoored as she has unfortunately realized it is. Like I don't think she wants to go back to Jersey and go like, wait, I thought I had more here, and this house isn't here, my mom isn't here, nothing's really here. So yeah, I think she is like trying to figure out what she can do to feel like she has community. But I also think for me, I wish there was this sense of like, I wish you could just take a break. Like, I really want you to take a break. I think you're so burnt out. I think you're reaching this point of exhaustion emotionally, physically, all of those things. And you've really gone through one of the worst days of your life. Like I almost want her to stop thinking about all of those things and yeah, I don't know, focus on something else.
Yeah, because you're talking about like she had that study that she was doing, and then she lost the funding for it. And it feels like if she could, that's kind of where she would want to go next too, right? Like if she could get that funding, would that be like the number one thing for her?
Totally. But there's so many, and the PITT does a good job of mirroring what's happening in real life. There's so many studies that are being underfunded, cut on the federal level, on the state level, because they serve marginalized and underfunded and under-resourced communities. I would say that's more of a reason to fund those studies, but for whatever reason, that's why they're being underfunded. So yeah, I think like because of what's happening in the world around her too, she feels like she has less of a direction.
Javadi says Mohan has no life. And like, yes, that did come up early in the season with him, but still, ouch, I have to say. How much is figuring out that part of her life, the like personal side and herself away from work, like something that she's even taking into consideration at this point?
I mean, I think she knows. I think that's why she's trying to feel like that's not true by staying here, where she maybe has like an iota more of a life than if she were to move back. But I think, yeah, I don't really know how to phrase this. I think she made a lot of efforts to feel like this isn't something that's a problem. Like maybe she went out for like coffee or a drink with some of her work colleagues in between season 1 and season 2, in between those two shifts. But I think she was still doing that as like a, oh, I did it. That's a social life, as opposed to something that's like restorative and actually connective. And yeah, I really hope for her that almost that she has or somehow finds a way to make friends that are outside of work. Like maybe she goes to like a cat cafe and like meets like a friend there, or maybe she I don't know, like goes on like walk clubs. Those are like a thing, right? Morning walk clubs. But yeah, I really hope she has friends that are outside of work.
She didn't have time to reflect on anything throughout this shift. That's the thing. It was one thing after another for her. So like, how is she doing?
I mean, not great. I do think it was like one of the worst days of her life. I think because she always thought she wasn't going to be this type of doctor who overlooked something, and it happened not once but twice over the course of the shift. Um, I mean, things that, in a lot of cases were out of her control, or maybe she just didn't, she didn't like check something thoroughly enough. And I think she feels really, really guilty. And I think she feels really, really deeply upset that she's become this type of doctor, or she feels like she's become this type of doctor that she promised she never would be.
We get that Mohan and Robbie scene in the finale about life not working out as you expect. How does she feel about what he has to say in that scene? And like, how would that be different if she hadn't acted the way he did during the shift towards her?
I think it is this moment for her where, so if you are as lonely as I am, and if you are really dealing with these same problems, why is it so hard for you to be kind, not be kinder to me, I think, or make me feel seen in all the moments that you had the opportunities to throughout the shift. So I think she's a little confused, but I do think she ultimately is someone who has like really deep empathy for people, even if she struggles with it sometimes with her coworkers. So I do think she uses that as a jumping off point to really talk about what she's sorry for at the end of that shift. And I also think it's the first time she's hearing more about his personal life. I think he's like really closed off. So I think she is kind of surprised that he's opening up to her in that way.
In the finale, we see like Mel is coming to grips with like everything she's learning about her sister and seeing like that her sister is like more put together than she thought, which is just a change for her because this is just what she thought her life was. It's like, she goes sees the fireworks with her sister, she watches Elf, but instead it's like, no, Becca has all these other plans that are basically their plans. So like, how much is it about like learning this about her sister, but also like realizing she has to learn more about herself as a result of who she is without her sister?
The main thing for Mel is the realization she's no longer needed. And having a system where you are a pivotal part, like this, you're two people, but you have to be one person that supports two people, both financially, emotionally, literally, physically, there, space-wise and everything. And then to have, in a way, a usurper come in and fulfill so many of the needs that you thought you could never be replaced I think Mel's more heartbroken than anything else. And it's not, it comes off as doubting her sister's ability, but I think it's just trying to find a way to be back as the needed party. And because she's not, it's just crushing. It's crushing.
But it's also she's trusting these people she has never met, like the boyfriend and the boyfriend's parents, with the most important person in her life. So it's also the concern there too, right?
Yeah, and I think there's just certain things that it's such a jump for her. It's not like they've had little steps getting up to this. It's like, I'm sorry, this came out of nowhere, and I think there's obviously some infantilization that Mel has with Becca, but I think it's less about Becca and more about Mel feeling needed, which I think most of it usually is. but yeah, I think there's, some basic concerns and just, wanting to be able to be in touch for emergency. Obviously, again, ER doctors gonna want to know, you got to give me all the details. Where does he live? I got to make sure if anything happens that, there's certain things set up. And I think that would be the case for pretty much anyone. But the reason it feels so much more, like constantly calling and asking, like, I need his parents' number, I feel like is much more of Mel going, I still have a purpose, I still have a need, she still needs me. If I don't get, and so it, once that's over, it just kind of sets in with her that she's not really needted anymore.
And then also King finds out she has to do another deposition just when she thought she was done with that. It was that relief for her. So like, I mean, all that buildup, how is she feeling about that?
I feel like it's more than she can handle. The truth is she's been handling more than she can handle for her whole life by a lot. And so I think this kind of thing, she's used to emergencies. She's been around, unfortunately, lots of death, including both of her parents, and lots of work and, sacrifice. But I think the kind of challenge the deposition is something new to her. I think every young doctor has doubts if they're going to be good enough. Every person in every profession is going to feel that, but obviously it's a lot more heated when it's life and death. And I think we've seen such a buildup of people around her talking about, the thing we haven't seen because we see just the bad day. But, Robbie saying that Mel is by far one of the best people he's ever trained. And it's like best doctors. And it's like, oh, okay. Which was hard to kind of, it was an interesting thing to try and play, like confidence and a complete lack of confidence and like all of that. But yeah, I think it's a crazy day. And I think just having someone doubt your skills in something that you did have confidence in, and now it's kind of crashing, and she has to do it again.
Talk about filming the fireworks scene near the end, because like it seemed like it was just like a moment to breathe, right, for Mohan?
Yeah, I mean, I think hour 15 out of all of the hours is like when she starts almost processing everything that's happened and just how, I mean, I would argue like unseen and unheard she's felt throughout this shift by her superiors. And I think the fireworks is really this moment of just like what is going on? Where am I going? How do I feel like I could stay here? Yeah, all of those things I think are definitely going through her head.
And we find out that Mohan and her mom now aren't talking. How does she feel about that?
I think she feels maybe a little embarrassed, maybe a little frustrated. I think it's a lot of conflicting feelings. But I do think at the end of that shift she goes home and she calls her. Like I do think that is something that she does. Because I think the only person in her life that can really understand how awful it was that what happened with Orlando happened is her mother.
I have to say, I absolutely love the duo of King and Santos. The karaoke scene at the end, talk about filming that.
Oh, it was a blast. I think it was both Issa and my last day. And we filmed that in the morning, early morning. And then we both had this massive chunk, and I think we had a scene afterwards. And that was, I think that was like a giant group of us's last scene, which was kind of a come down because we filmed it. It was awesome. And, we just kind of like had to, it's like 8 a.m. and you're trying to pretend to be drunk in a smoky karaoke bar. And you're kind of like, all right. And just kind of like, psyching yourself up. And it was a blast. And they completely let us do our thing. John was directing the episode and was like, all right, let's see. And we kind of did it. And he's like, yeah, can you take her hair down? Yeah. And we could do like a few things. And then it was like, all right. And I think we filmed it twice and that was it. but it was a blast.